The Galactic Concord had stood for over 4,000 cycles. A sprawling alliance of over 200 intelligent species, it was founded on a single principle: unity through cooperation. Worlds that joined agreed to disarmament, open knowledge sharing, and the resolution of disputes through diplomacy instead of war. For most of its history, the Concord worked. Disagreements were common, but peace, once established, mostly held. Then humanity arrived. They came later than most. Their homeworld, Earth, was far from the core roots and nestled deep in an overlooked spiral arm. First contact was accidental. An independent Concord survey ship picked up a strange signal from a Terran moon base. What followed was a whirlwind of meetings, translation protocols, and cautious observation. At first, humans were seen as unremarkable. Bipedal, oxygen-based, emotionally reactive, their biology was within the range of many Concord species. But then something unexpected happened. Humans didn't just catch up, they adapted. Within one generation of contact, human scientists were publishing Concord-level research. Their military fleets, while smaller and less advanced, were organized in ways that impressed even the hardened strategists of the Krell ascendancy. Their cultural exports, films, literature, philosophy, spread quickly across entertainment networks. There was something strangely compelling about their intensity, and then the conflicts began. Human diplomats questioned old treaties others had long accepted. Their captains refused to retreat from pirate zones the Concord had abandoned. Even, their traders operated at a pace that unsettled slower-moving economies. Some Concord members found them inspiring, many found them troubling, and a few, quietly, began to worry. The incident at Delcar's Reach changed everything. It began as a routine border dispute between two Concord members, minor claims over asteroid mining rights. Normally, the matter would be resolved through negotiation, but the humans, stationed nearby on a peacekeeping rotation, intervened when one party began arming civilian stations. They acted without orders. Ships were deployed. Systems were locked down. Civilians were protected. But protocol had been broken. The human commander, when questioned later, said simply, "If we had waited, people would have died." To many in the Concord, it was a noble act. To others, it was a warning sign. If humanity was willing to break procedure in the name of principle, what else might they break? The ban was proposed only 6 cycles later. The wording was careful. Suspension of humanity's membership in Concord governance, due to procedural irregularities and unresolved diplomatic concerns. But no one was fooled. It was a ban. Total exclusion from Concord decisions, ship lanes, knowledge exchanges, and defense agreements. The vote passed unanimously. Some representatives looked uncomfortable as they cast their votes. Others appeared relieved. A few smiled. The broadcast reached every major world within an hour. On the homeworld of Zathara, a political cartoonist posted a sketch of a human being escorted out of a Concord meeting room by towering guards. The human in the drawing looked small and confused, holding a document labeled Hope. The caption read, "Too much, too soon." It went viral overnight. Talk shows began inviting experts to discuss the human question. The tone was rarely hostile. It didn't need to be. People preferred mockery to fear. Humans, they decided, weren't evil. They were just unpredictable, loud, too emotional, too ambitious. It became easy to mock them because it felt safe to do so. They were gone, banned, out of sight and, over time, out of mind, but not entirely, on the edge of conquered territory, where governance was looser and survival still depended on sharp thinking and quick action. Human names still came up. Veterans remembered old joint operations. Pirates spoke carefully about certain border systems that still bore Terran markers, and in deep archives hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy, some files remained sealed, marked with the human emblem. a simple blue planet surrounded by 12 stars. Most Concord citizens never saw those files. Most had moved on, convinced the chapter was closed. But history, especially human history, rarely stayed silent for long. And just beyond the outer rim, something was watching, listening, waiting. In the cycle following humanity's banishment, from the Galactic Concord, public interest in Earth's departure was short-lived. For a brief time, there were debates on political forums and social streams. Commentators asked whether the decision had been fair. Historians argued over the ethics of banning a species rather than guiding them. But interest quickly shifted from politics to entertainment. What began as speculation became satire. A comedy troupe on the Thalorn Entertainment Grid produced a skit called Humans on the Council, where an actor in an oversized Terran uniform shouted at peaceful alien ambassadors, accusing them of conspiracies and stealing their space coffee. The skit's punchline involved the human accidentally activating a missile launch with their elbow. Audiences howled with laughter. Within a standard week, the sketch had been translated into 17 languages and rebroadcast across the core systems. Other programs followed suit. Soon, a segment called Human Moments appeared on the nightly feed of Zorlax and Truth, the Concord's most watched news comedy show. The segment began with archived footage of actual Terran broadcasts, protests, speeches, and battlefield transmissions, overlaid with cartoonish sound effects and voice dubs. Soldiers giving tactical orders were reinterpreted as arguing over snacks. Emergency evacuation footage was edited to appear like a game show. The ratings soared. For most citizens of the Concord, this was their only exposure to humanity. They had never met a real human. They had never fought beside them or watched them work in labs or assist during disasters. What they knew now was a caricature, loud, stubborn, dramatic, and strangely obsessed with declaring victory before battles even started. In media hubs like Jathari Prime, humans became the foundation for an entire genre of late-night content. Merchandise followed. Posters of fictional human generals posing dramatically with exploding backgrounds lined school walls. A children's show even featured a friendly alien character who taught galactic etiquette by correcting the mistakes of his imaginary human friend, a sock puppet that shouted nonsense and knocked over furniture. It became a kind of ritual. Laugh at the humans, shake your head at their foolishness, then turn off the screen and forget they ever mattered. But not everyone was laughing. Out in the quieter sectors of the Concord, far from the bustling trade lanes and media capitals, older members of the fleet remembered different humans. They remembered the relief teams that arrived after the asteroid storm over Rella Station. They remembered the engineers who worked 20-hour shifts rebuilding failing atmospheres. They remembered the voices, tired, resolute, sometimes even kind. But those memories had no place in the current narrative. When veteran Orden Kesh once, a decorated fleet medic, submitted a letter to a popular station's editorial stream titled The Humans I Knew, it received less than 1,000 views. The network quietly removed it after advertisers threatened to pull support. Even within Concord institutions, the mocking tone had become the default. Academy lectures on human history were shortened. Training modules skipped over Terran contributions in favor of more stable species. It was more convenient to forget. And that forgetting created a distance, one that widened with every joke and sketch and meme. The only ones who seemed to resist were those who remembered the fringes. The border officers, the pirate hunters, the colonists who built outposts under thin atmospheres with unreliable support. They didn't speak loudly, but among themselves they told stories that sounded nothing like the broadcast versions. Stories of humans who stayed behind during plasma storms so others could escape. Of captains who chose not to fire when given the chance because they saw something in the eyes of the other crew. Of mistakes, yes, but also of mercy, of growth, of determination. Stories. that never reached the core worlds. The Concord had made its decision. The Council had spoken, the public had laughed, and for a long time, it seemed like that was the end of the story. But stories have a way of continuing, especially when no one is watching. Far beyond the center systems, in quiet networks and hidden channels, something was stirring. A forgotten file, a forgotten voice, waiting. Verit Casso didn't care about comedy shows or trending jokes. She had never watched Zorlax and Truth or shared a human moments meme. What mattered to her were patterns, real ones, data trails that told stories others ignored. And lately, the numbers didn't make sense. Stationed on Corel Station 9, a mid-tier Concord intelligence hub on the edge of Sector 4, Verit was tasked with monitoring long-range incident reports. Most of her job involved cataloging minor disputes between trade vessels, filing pirate activity, and updating conflict zone risk maps. It was routine, if uneventful, until recently. She noticed the first anomaly 2 cycles ago. A remote mining colony in the Porthos dust field had sent out a distress call, citing an unusually coordinated pirate assault. The attackers had jammed. Local comms used decoy drones to draw out security forces and timed their entry with the station's artificial night cycle. It was textbook strategy. Too clean for pirates. Verit flagged it. No one reviewed the report. 2 weeks later, a Concord patrol convoy was ambushed in a narrow system corridor. The enemy disabled their lead ship with an ion burst, waited for the support vessels to reposition, then struck with precision. Minimal loss of life, but complete seizure of cargo. Again, Verit flagged it. This time, a supervisor replied, "Isolated incident. Pirates are evolving. Keep cataloging." But Verit didn't let it go. She started digging. Quietly. She cross-referenced archived fleet data, pulled training footage from early conquered human joint operations, and compared engagement patterns. What she found was disturbing. The tactics used in these recent attacks bore striking resemblance to battlefield methods once taught by the Terran Defense Forces, methods documented just before humanity's expulsion from the Conquered. The data alignment was uncanny. 3-stage disruption, sensor blindfolding, split force misdirection. It wasn't just that the pirates were using smarter strategies. It was which strategies they were using. One night, Verit stayed late in the analytics lab. With most of the station staff offline or resting, she compiled a full report, 17 incidents across 6 months, all with signatures that traced back to pre-ban human doctrine. She included probability models, fleet maneuver overlays, and ship design similarities. She sent it directly to her department head. By morning, her request for review had been declined. The reply was brief. "Interesting theory, but speculative. Human tactics were never classified. Anyone could have copied them. Let's not stir old stories." Verit stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't just dismissal, it was avoidance. The kind that came when people didn't want to look too closely, as if even mentioning human influence had become politically inconvenient. She leaned back in her chair and stared at the hollow screen displaying a paused footage of a pirate ship's escape trajectory. The vectors were familiar. She remembered, seeing something similar in a training lecture, one that had quoted a human admiral. Her thoughts were interrupted by a message notification. Private channel. Encrypted. She opened it. The text was brief. "I believe you're right. Meet me off-grid. Share no details via channel. Discretion required." It was unsigned, but the routing code belonged to a retired fleet officer, one she hadn't spoken to in years. Her heart pounded. Something was happening. And if her instincts were right, it wasn't just pirates copying old strategies. Someone out there was using Terran military doctrine deliberately and efficiently. That suggested more than memory. It suggested contact. Verit closed the report files and began wiping her access logs. Her time at Kirill Station 9 had just become far more complicated than she expected. Elsewhere in the Concorde, the jokes continued. A new meme trended that week, a human cartoon general commanding a banana instead of a ship. The audience laughed. Verret didn't, because somewhere out beyond the rim, someone was playing a long game. And if the old Terran playbook was back in circulation, then humanity wasn't as gone as the Concorde believed. They had just gone quiet. The ship was a wreck when they found it. It drifted silently through the Orin clasp, a neglected system on the edge of Concorde jurisdiction. No active beacon, no pulse, no engine heat. From a distance, it looked like a piece of space debris, until the scrapper crew from the independent hauler Miral's Wager moved in closer. Jacid Varn, the ship's lead salvager, was used to abandon freighters and failed colony pods. But as they scanned the vessel's hull, something gave him pause. The ship's signature wasn't listed in any Concorde registry, not even in the deep archives. The ID tag, corroded but barely legible, read HSS Lorica. Terran, murmured Jacid, adjusting his headset. It's human. His crew stared at. The monitor. Are we even allowed to touch that? One of them asked. Jacid shrugged. It's not a Concorde ship. We're not in core space. If no one claims it, it's fair salvage. He sent over a drone team to breach the hull. The atmosphere inside was long gone, but structural integrity held in some compartments. No bodies, no logs in the main terminal. Whatever mission the Lorica had once flown, it was gone now, lost to time and vacuum. But in the bridge compartment, tucked beneath a half-collapsed console, they found a data core. It was black, boxy, and marked with the faded Terran emblem. A blue planet surrounded by 12 silver stars. Jacid didn't think twice. He pocketed the device and logged it under uncategorized scrap. In his experience, most data cores were corrupted or encrypted beyond use. Still, buyers liked the mystery. He uploaded it to his ship's offline terminal and ran a surface scan. Most of the files were damaged. A few had trace military encryption, definitely Concorde illegal to crack. He sighed, about to discard the drive, when one file auto-opened. There was no title, no folder, just a video. He clicked it out of boredom. It was silent at first. A black screen, faint flickers of static. Then gradually, a scene emerged. The interior of a human ship. Military by the look of the walls and consoles. Damage alarms blinked faintly. The air looked thick with smoke. The camera must have been helmet-mounted. It shifted with the movements of a crew member jogging through narrow corridors. Jacid watched, drawn in despite himself. The video lasted just under 4 minutes. It showed no special effects, no editing, no narration, just raw footage. A crew, under siege, moving fast and methodically. A wounded officer being lifted by 2 others. A young technician sealing a blast door behind fleeing civilians. No one spoke for the camera. They weren't performing. They were surviving. The final scene showed a pilot entering a small drop pod. He took a slow breath, looked into the lens, and said quietly, "If anyone finds this, tell them we stayed until the very last second. Not because it was easy, because it was right." Then the pod launched. The screen cut to black. Jacid sat in silence for a long time, the hum of the ship's engines soft in his ears. He played the video again. Then a third time. He didn't understand why it hit him so hard. He had seen plenty of old battle footage, but this felt different. It didn't show heroes or villains, just people, real ones. Against his better judgment, he uploaded the video to his public mesh channel. The title he gave it was simple. They stayed. He forgot about it after that. He had other cargo to process, other clients to call, but across the network, quietly and without warning, the video began to spread. A fringe history forum picked it up first. Then, a retired fleet commander reposted it, calling it a reminder of what we lost. Within hours, it had been copied, mirrored, and translated into a dozen conquered dialects. By the next morning, it was viral. On every world connected to the net, civilians and officers watched the same 4 minutes. Some replayed it several times. Others saved it without knowing why. No commentary, no music, just the footage. By the end of the day, it had been viewed nearly 10 million times. And somewhere deep within conquered intelligence, Verit Cassos stared at the screen, frozen mid-frame, on the pilot's last words. It was no longer a theory, no longer a warning. The humans were not forgotten. They had just been silent, until now. No one expected silence to speak so loudly. The video, only 4 minutes long, continued its rapid climb across conquered networks. By the end of the second day, it had crossed into mainstream media. Major news streams, reluctant at first, began reporting on it simply because they couldn't afford not to. Engagement numbers soared. Even networks that had built their brands on mocking humans paused their usual satire segments. For the first time in years, the Terran name wasn't part of a punchline. What struck most viewers wasn't the action. It wasn't the tension or the visuals. There were plenty of better edited simulations and dramatizations across the Concord entertainment grids. What struck them was the simplicity. No music, no edits, no filters. Just people making decisions with calm, practiced urgency. People helping one another, not to win a war or prove a point, but because someone had to. Because if they didn't, others would die. The viral turning point came on day 3. A decorated war historian named Professor Errol Niven posted a response titled, "This Wasn't Supposed to Exist." In it, he explained that the battle featured, in the footage, an undocumented skirmish during the final weeks of the Orion siege, had never appeared in any conquered reports. The ship, HSS Lorica, wasn't listed in any fleet registry. The pilot's identity remained unknown. According to the official timeline, the ship simply vanished. But now, the world knew it hadn't. Professor Niven's analysis went further. He detailed the tactics shown in the video, comparing them to standard conquered protocols. He pointed out key differences: human improvisation, multi-layered fallback coordination, and subtle non-verbal signals that suggested advanced training. Under high-stress environments, his conclusion was blunt. This was not chaos. This was cohesion. These were not reckless survivors. These were professionals, trained, focused, and willing to die. Not for orders, but for each other. That post alone was shared over 5 million times in the next 24 hours. Suddenly, the story shifted. No longer was the video seen as a historical curiosity. It became a mirror, and for many in the Concord, an uncomfortable one. On the wealthy core worlds, people who had never thought seriously about humans were watching the footage during work hours, pausing and replaying frames. Younger citizens, who had only ever known humans through exaggerated comedy sketches, began asking questions. Schools saw a surge in requests for old Terran history documents. Archive servers had to expand access bandwidth. On trade stations and transport routes, the mood was more immediate. Crews who had once worked alongside human officers found themselves remembering stories they'd buried. Stories of long nights spent repairing failing systems, of meals shared in silence, of fast decisions made under fire. Some of those stories began to appear online. Short clips, personal accounts, photos taken in corridors and outposts long since decommissioned. Each time a memory was shared, the comment sections grew longer. I remember her. She patched my arm during the comet evacuation. That's the captain who gave me her own breath mask. He didn't even know our language, but he stood in front of the hatch when the enemy boarded. The image of humanity was changing, and it was changing quickly. Even Zorlax and Truth, the long-running comedy show, felt the shift. On its next episode, the usual human moments segment was replaced with a quiet montage. no jokes, just images from the video paired with a simple message. Sometimes, we forget the truth behind the laughter. The audience didn't laugh. They watched in silence. Many stood when it ended. By the end of the week, debates had begun on Concord Council platforms, not about reinstating humanity, but about how they had been remembered. Whether the ban, passed so easily and so unanimously, had led to something worse than exile. It had led to erasure, but not anymore. Somewhere beyond the rim, a signal had been lit. And across the galaxy, people were watching. The Concord Council. Hall was quieter than usual. There were no protesters outside, no delegations arguing over trade routes or mining claims. For the first time in years, representatives from all sectors sat in near silence as a video played on the central holo display. It was the same 4-minute recording that had already circled the galaxy 1,000 times. But this time, no one interrupted. No one laughed. Verret Casso stood at the edge of the council floor, watching the reactions. She had been summoned, not questioned. It was a sharp change from 3 weeks earlier when her report had been ignored, dismissed, and buried in the bureaucratic archive. Now, following the discovery of the HSS Lorica and Da, the viral impact of the video, Concord leadership wanted answers, not because they believed in her theory, but because the public did. When the video ended, no one spoke immediately. Then the High Counselor of Strategic Affairs, a gray-plated Yelvani named Thuras Vel, turned toward Verret. "Analyst Casso," he said, voice even. "Your previous reports connected recent pirate attacks to historic Terran tactics. In light of new public interest, we ask you to present your findings again." "Fully." Verret nodded. She stepped forward, heart steady, eyes sharp. "I reviewed over 17 incidents across 6 months," she began, her voice clear. "In each case, the attackers used strategies consistent with human military doctrine: rapid reorganization, misdirection, multi-layered field deception. These aren't standard pirate tactics. Someone's using old Terran methods on purpose." A representative from the Argentry Combine leaned forward. "Could it be coincidence? Or imitation? Perhaps old training manuals were leaked during the ban." Verret didn't hesitate. "Possible, but unlikely. The tactics used are not just copied, they're executed with discipline. These attackers aren't reading from a book. They've been trained." That caused murmurs across the room. She pressed ahead. "The reappearance of the Lorica proves that not all human fleets were dismantled after the ban. At least one vessel remained active, and judging from the footage, it wasn't rogue. It was operating with clear coordination under crisis conditions." Another counselor asked the question everyone had been avoiding. "Do you believe humans are still out there, operating outside Concord space?" Verret paused, not for effect, but because the answer still shook her. "Yes, I believe a portion of the human population survived independently. I believe they maintained their training, their culture, their purpose. And I believe they've been watching us the entire time." The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was uncertain. No one had planned for this. They had mocked humans, so freely because they had believed without question that humanity was gone. Not dead, perhaps, but disbanded, dispersed, forgotten. But if they were wrong, if humans had simply gone quiet, then the galaxy's assumptions were built on sand. "Counselor." Vel turned back to the screen. He tapped a command and a still frame from the video filled the display. The human pilot, seated in the launch pod, looking into the camera with calm resolve. "People are asking what we lost when we passed the ban," Vel said. "But that's not the right question." He turned to face the room. "The right question is, what did we awaken?" Across the Concord, that same question echoed. Public debates surged in nearly every system. Civilians demanded that the council declassify old human records. Military academies reopened archived files marked restricted. A memorial to the Terran partnership was hastily reinstated on Cyrene Station, then showered with tributes from travelers, flowers, candles, and notes written in dozens of languages. What began as curiosity was becoming something deeper, respect, and beneath it all, a quiet, growing worry. Because if humanity had truly endured and if their methods were now being used in live combat zones, then the Conquered wasn't just watching a species return, they were watching a force re-emerge, a force they once laughed at, a force they once pushed away. Back on Kirill Station 9, Verret sat alone in her quarters reviewing a new transmission. It came from a deep-rim scout vessel patrolling a neglected sector. The message was short, audio only. We found them. A colony. Human tech. Human signals. They didn't hide. They welcomed us. She leaned forward as the last line played. They knew we'd come. They were ready. The shuttle's engines hummed softly as it descended through the thick atmosphere of Asterion IV, a world barely touched by Concord maps and forgotten by most. Below, sprawling forests gave way to glass-domed cities glowing with steady, warm light. The air was breathable but crisp, carrying a faint scent of pine and ozone. Verret Casso watched from the viewport, her breath catching in her throat. After years of studying archives, analyzing fragmented reports, and chasing rumors, she was finally here, on the homeworld of a human colony that had survived. The Concord delegation's shuttle touched down smoothly in a clearing just outside, the main settlement. Waiting on the landing pad were a small group of humans, tall, varied in appearance, dressed in functional uniforms that blended technology and tradition. They looked nothing like the caricatures she'd seen in jokes or the faceless silhouettes she'd imagined. A woman stepped forward first, her eyes sharp, her presence commanding yet calm. She extended a hand. "Welcome, Verret Casso. We've been expecting you." Verret shook it, noting the firm grip and steady gaze. "Thank you. It's an honor." The woman gestured toward the city. "I'm Commander Ilara Miles. We've heard about your work." As they walked, Verret couldn't help but notice the blend of technology and nature. Solar panels shimmered alongside towering trees. Robots tended gardens. Children played near holographic displays that showed historical footage from Earth centuries old. Ilara explained, "When the ban was passed, many of us refused to accept exile quietly. We formed colonies far beyond conquered control, surviving by adapting and keeping our heritage alive. Our technology evolved, but so did our principles. We're not the reckless, loud humans you think you know." Verret nodded, feeling the weight of the words. "The video, the Lorica, it showed courage, not chaos." Ilara smiled faintly. "It was a sacrifice. We chose to hold the line so others could escape. That video was a message, a reminder that we never truly left." Inside the city's council chamber, Verret met others, scientists, former military leaders, diplomats, humans who had built an independent society grounded in cooperation and resilience. They shared stories of hardship, of betrayal, of hope. One elder, a man with silver-streaked hair and calm eyes, spoke quietly. The Concord's laughter was a shield for their fears, but now that laughter has faltered. Verret realized the weight of his words. The ban had been more than political. It had been an attempt to erase a people, a history, a future. But here, on Asterion IV, that future was alive. As the meeting ended, Ilara pulled Verret aside. "We want to rejoin the galaxy, not as outcasts, but as partners. The past can't be changed, but the future can be." Verret felt a surge of hope. "I want to help." Outside, the stars shone bright over the domed city. Somewhere beyond, the Concord awaited their next move. The galaxy was no longer just watching a lost species. It was witnessing the return of humanity, and this time, the story was only just beginning. The Concord Council chamber was packed. After months of secretive talks, tentative diplomacy, and growing public support, the day had finally arrived for the official debate on humanity's status. Representatives from every sector gathered, their faces a mix of skepticism, curiosity, and cautious hope. Cameras and hollow streams broadcasted the session across the galaxy. Millions tuned in. Verret Casso sat quietly in the observers' gallery, flanked by Commander Alara Miles and a small delegation of humans from Asterion 4. The atmosphere crackled with tension. This was more than a political debate. It was a moment that could reshape the future. High Counselor Thuris Vel opened the session. We have long treated humanity as a closed chapter, an exile too costly to revisit. But recent revelations, videos, testimonies, and now direct contact demand we reconsider. He gestured toward a holo projection displaying the HSS Lorica footage, followed by images of the Asterion colony and statements from their leaders. The question before us is not simply whether humans exist. They do. The question is how we move forward, together or apart. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some representatives voiced fears, old prejudices, concerns about military power, cultural differences. Others spoke of justice, reconciliation, and the opportunity to restore a lost alliance. Verret watched as Alara stood to address the council. We are not here to rewrite history. We honor it, Alara said steadily. But we are also here to build the future. Our people have survived, adapted, and thrived not because we defied the Concord, but because we believed in cooperation. She paused, eyes sweeping the room. The video you saw, it was not an anomaly. It was who we are, steadfast, resilient, and committed to peace. Several counselors nodded, some with visible emotion. Then a voice broke through from the far end. A representative of the Argentry Combine, known for their hardline stance. Trust is earned. Words are not enough. The Terran ban was enacted, after serious conflict. How can we be certain this is not a new threat? Alara met the challenge without hesitation. Because we have invited Concord observers to visit, to see our cities, our governance, our lives. Because our military cooperation now includes joint training exercises. Because we remember what it means to be allies, not enemies. Verret felt the weight of those words settle over the room. The debate lasted hours, votes were taken, amendments proposed. When the final tally appeared on the holo display, silence fell. The Conquered would lift the ban on humanity. A new chapter would begin. Outside the chamber, news outlets exploded. Celebrations and protests unfolded in equal measure. But most voices shared a cautious optimism. Verret stepped out into the cool night air on the steps of the council building. Alara joined her, smiling. We've come a long way, Verret said. Alara nodded. And there's still much to do. But now, the galaxy will know humans as more than a joke or a ghost. We're back. Verret looked up at the stars, ancient, endless, and full of possibility. A single video had changed everything in seconds, but what followed was a lifetime of new stories. Stories of cooperation, of trust, of hope, and the understanding that sometimes even the quietest silence holds the loudest truth.